A detective opens a shoebox in the back of a closet. Inside, neatly arranged, are 17 driver's licenses, not stolen for money, not sold, just kept in order for years like a collection. He wasn't hiding evidence. He was preserving a memory. This detail shows up again and again in cases that otherwise share almost nothing in common. Different cities, different decades, different methods entirely. And yet quietly in a drawer, a box, a storage unit, investigators keep finding the same strange pattern. Small personal items taken not for value but for something else entirely. A ring, a photograph, a single earring, sometimes something even smaller, a lock of hair, a scrap of clothing, an object with no resale value whatsoever. To an outsider it looks pointless, even reckless. Why would anyone hold onto something that could send them to prison, when destroying it would take 5 minutes and eliminate the risk completely? The answer is not what most people expect, and once you understand it, you'll never look at a trophy the same way again. Start with what the item is actually for. It is not proof of the crime. The killer already knows what happened. He doesn't need a photograph to remind him of the facts. What he needs is something else entirely, a way to re-enter the feeling. Memory fades. Even the most intense emotional experiences soften and blur with time, the same way any other memory does. For most people, that fading is a mercy. For a specific type of offender, it's a problem because the feeling generated by the crime, whatever twisted form of power, control, or release it represented, was the entire point. And if the feeling fades, there has to be a way to bring it back. This is where the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, the group that essentially invented modern criminal profiling, made one of its most important discoveries. Working through hundreds of interviews with incarcerated offenders in the 1970s and 1980s, researcher Robert Ressler helped establish a now widely used distinction between two very different kinds of stolen items. A souvenir is something taken to remember the victim. A trophy is something taken to remember the achievement. The line between them sounds subtle. It isn't. One is about the person who was harmed. The other is about the offender's own sense of accomplishment. Ressler's interviews revealed something chilling in its practicality. Many offenders described returning to these objects specifically to relive the crime mentally, sometimes years later, using the item as a kind of key that unlocked the entire memory in vivid detail. Touch it, look at it, hold it, and the feeling comes rushing back almost intact. Without it, the memory stays trapped behind the same fog that dulls every other memory a person has. This single insight reframes the entire behavior. The item isn't a mistake born of arrogance. It's functional. It's a tool, deliberately kept, for a very specific psychological purpose. The forensic nurse and researcher Ann Burgess, who worked directly alongside the FBI's early profiling unit, studied this pattern from a slightly different angle, focusing specifically on organized offenders, the ones who plan meticulously and rarely leave forensic evidence behind. Burgess found something that seems almost contradictory at first. The most careful, controlled offenders, the ones methodical enough to avoid nearly every mistake that leads to capture, were often the same offenders most likely to keep something small and deeply incriminating. Why would the most careful criminal keep the one thing capable of ending everything? Burgess's research suggests the answer lies in what the item represents psychologically. For an organized offender, control isn't just about avoiding capture. It's about extending control over the entire experience, including its aftermath. Destroying the item would mean surrendering the last piece of the crime that still belongs to him. Keeping it, even at enormous risk, means the experience isn't over. It's ongoing. Every time he opens that drawer, he isn't just remembering. He's still, in some small private way, in control of it. This connects to something the FBI profiler Roy Hazelwood documented extensively in his work on ritual behavior in violent crime. Hazelwood found that souvenirs frequently function as part of a private ritual, a repeated behavior the offender performs specifically to recreate the emotional state of the original act. Some offenders described elaborate private routines involving the item, specific times of day, specific locations in the home, a kind of solitary ceremony that outsiders would never detect, built entirely around a small object that looks, to anyone else, completely unremarkable. Hazelwood's research also uncovered something particularly unsettling about why these rituals often escalate over time. Just like any other repeated stimulus, the emotional response to revisiting a souvenir tends to fade with repetition. The 10th time holding the object doesn't produce the same intensity as the first. For some offenders, this fading isn't just disappointing. It becomes a driving pressure toward committing another crime, specifically to generate a new, more vivid souvenir capable of producing that original intensity again. This is one of the most disturbing implications in the research. The object doesn't just document a person's worst act. In some cases, it actively participates in generating the next one. Understanding this transforms how investigators approach searches entirely. A missing item from a crime scene isn't just a loose thread to track down. It's a psychological signature. Its size, its type, its meaning, all reveal something specific about what the offender needed the object to represent, and by extension, what kind of person they're looking for. An offender who takes photographs is documenting a story, someone deeply invested in narrative and memory. An offender who takes a piece of jewelry is often drawn to symbols of intimacy or possession. An offender who takes something as small and personal as a lock of hair is frequently seeking a physical, tactile connection that photographs alone can't provide. None of these details are arbitrary. Behavioral analysts increasingly treat souvenir selection the way linguists treat word choice, not incidental, but deeply revealing of the exact psychology underneath. This also explains one of the most consistent patterns across decades of criminal investigation. Offenders rarely destroy these items voluntarily, even when logic says they should, even when they know investigators are actively searching, even when keeping the object is, statistically, one of the most common reasons offenders eventually get caught. The pull toward keeping it isn't rational. It was never meant to be. It's emotional, private, and for the person doing it, apparently worth the risk every single time, which raises the question hiding underneath all of this the whole time. If the object is this dangerous, why does it feel worth keeping at all? The uncomfortable answer, according to Ressler, Burgess, and Hazelwood's combined research, is that for a specific kind of offender, the crime itself was never actually finished the moment it ended. It continues, quietly, privately, every time that drawer opens again. The souvenir isn't a leftover fragment of something that's over. It's a battery kept charged, waiting to be used again. Somewhere in a box, in a drawer, in a storage unit no one has opened in years, there may be a small object sitting in the dark right now, waiting for the one person who still knows exactly what it means, and exactly why they can't let it go.